Aim. I stretched in bed, waking up when I felt someone rubbing myself from behind. I was amazed and confused for a moment, but then I remembered where I was and smiled contentedly. I felt his body pressed against me from behind, and his arm wrapped around me and stroked my chest. I relaxed. He gently pressed me and very slowly had sex with the sleepy me. He knew I liked it. We hugged tenderly until the alarm went off. My lover got out of bed and headed to the next room to get ready for the workday. We always booked 2 adjoining rooms with a door between them to avoid suspicion. It would be bad if our affair were revealed. I am Dan's reference. We worked together for a little over 2 years and are lovers most of the time. My role requires us to work very closely together and frequently travel across the country to other offices, meeting clients, and attending industry sales conferences. This gave us ample opportunity to be together without arousing suspicion. Yes, I'm married, and my husband works from home. My marriage was a disaster. I was only 15 when I dated my first and only boyfriend, Alan, in high school. One night while my parents were away, one thing led to another, and I soon discovered I was pregnant. By the time we came out to our parents, it was too late to do anything other than give birth. My parents were furious and forced me to have an abortion. His parents wanted us to keep the child and even offered to take care of him until we finished school. Alan stayed with me throughout my pregnancy, even though we were often called names by other students and our teachers about being an approachable girl. Alan often got into fights with other guys who bullied me, and he was even temporarily suspended from classes. The birth was difficult, but he was with me all the time. Finally, our beautiful baby girl arrived 2 days after my 16th birthday. When we took Lauren in our arms, we realized that we could not give her to anyone. At first, my parents practically disowned me, so we moved in with Alan's parents, being parents ourselves. True to their word, his parents spent a lot of time raising little Lauren while we were finishing high school. After finishing school, we both got jobs, got married in a simple ceremony without a wedding ceremony, and moved into our tiny house. Our future plans for university had to be put on hold once again, as yet another mistake resulted in the arrival of Lauren's sister, whom we named Emma. In short, over the next decade we did a lot of work, worked hard, and raised our children with the support of our parents. We both worked part-time, combining study and work. At the same time, we managed to raise 2 wonderful daughters. We loved each other very much. Alan is absolutely crazy about his girls, and they are very close. My relationship with them is somewhat more tense. We argue often, and sometimes I resent them. I guess subconsciously, I blame them for not letting me live the life I had planned when I was 15. After graduation, I received a position as an assistant to the director of business development for a medical device company, Dan Johnson. I was then 29, and he was 38. Dan and I worked well together from the start. We quickly turned into a strong professional team. I loved my job, sales were on the rise, and management was happy and encouraged me greatly. I finally felt like I had a truly normal life. My job entailed a fair amount of overnight travel, sometimes alone, but more often with my boss, Dan. It was really exciting to travel to new places around the country to meet with clients, negotiate sales deals, and interact with very senior executives. I had a fantastic experience and loved it. I was traveling about every 3 weeks out of 4. My travel schedule could rank from 1 to 2 nights a week, and sometimes on weekends. While work and travel were great, it meant I was away from my husband and girls. Alan had to take on most of the parenting responsibilities. Dan and I spent a lot of time together and got to know each other very well. Despite the age difference, he got married around the same time as me and had 3 younger children. To keep Alan from worrying about me traveling with the boss, I told him the excused lie that I mostly traveled alone or with another woman. I also told him that although I work with my boss professionally, he was a bit of an asshole and I didn't like him personally. In fact, my boss was great, and I was fascinated by him and also very passionate. I loved spending time in his company. When we traveled together, We had a habit of finding cozy restaurants to dine in while sipping wine and chatting for hours. One evening, about 6 months after I started working at the firm, and Dan and I had received a particularly large sales order earlier that day, we booked a special dinner with a bottle of expensive French champagne. And then, as we sat face to face, feeling elated and slightly hazy from the champagne and delicious dinner, he extended his hand and placed it on top of mine. Looking deeply into my eyes, he said, "You know, Amy, that I'm falling in love with you very much." My heart erupted into a beating frenzy, and I couldn't say a word. After what seemed like an eternity, but actually took about 15 seconds, he stood up and extended his hand to me. I hesitated for a moment, then took his hand and stood up. He silently led me to his hotel room. Once in the room, we tore each other's clothes off and fell onto the bed in a passionate frenzy. We had sex all night. In the morning, we woke up and made tender love. I felt like I had died and gone to heaven. Our flight home was late in the morning, so we ordered breakfast to our room and lay listlessly naked in bed, and after eating, we made love again before leaving. On the way home, I felt guilty for being a cheater. In my defense, I thought that when I was younger, I never had the opportunity to spread my wings with other men, and I deserved at least one time. If anything, this will serve as a lesson to my husband for neglecting me, since our sex life never recovered from the difficult early years of our marriage. I realized that last night I was so busy with Dan that I didn't even call Emma to wish her a happy birthday. She had just turned 11 years old and was growing up quickly. I looked at Dan sitting next to me on the plane, and he smiled back and squeezed my hand. I realized that despite the guilt and the fact that it was wrong, I was hooked. When I returned home, the feeling of guilt came flooding back. Alan was very happy to see me a week later, but I avoided his hugs and kisses. Later that night, when he wanted to make love, I refused, using the excuse of being tired. I was really tired, but I was also sore from the workout Dan gave me. This was the first time I turned down Alan. Back to the present. Our business, which began 18 months ago, has not died down. Over time, I dealt with the guilt and hid my secret from Alan, blocking some of my emotions at home. I didn't realize at the time how emotionally distant I was from Alan and my girls. My thoughts always seemed to be about Dan and when we could be together again. Lying and hiding it became second nature, and I didn't feel so guilty anymore. I fell hopelessly in love with Dan and sometimes thought about leaving Alan and joining him. We sometimes discussed it jokingly as we lay naked after sex, but we both knew it was a big step that could cause a lot of harm, especially to our children. Our company was expanding, so business trips became more frequent. Sometimes, when there were no business trips planned during the week, we would arrange mock business trips, staying overnight at a hotel in a nearby city. We also sometimes went on short weekend trips together to celebrate our anniversaries and birthdays, using as an excuse to attend a conference in a distant location. The conference was always conveniently located far away, in a good seaside resort. We chose the places where the real conference took place, so we had an alibi. We were extremely careful at work and developed a pocket face, acting very professionally when other people were around. We never left together for a secret meeting, had lunch at different times, came and left work at different times, etc. We created secret email accounts outside of the work IT system and only communicated through them. We have never met in our city. When we had to communicate in the office, it was exclusively in large groups, and we never sat next to each other and did not talk one-on-one. I usually called home at the end of the day, choosing a time so that I could not be interrupted or surprised. I never told Alan where I was staying, and he never asked. At home, I complained to my husband about my ass boss and having to travel so often and work so hard. He often asked why I didn't find another job with a good boss and less travel. I just told him that I was studying too much and they were paying me too much to quit. At casual work events where partners were expected to be present, we were very careful in managing our facial expressions and emotions. I introduced my husband to the boss, and he introduced his wife to us. We were always careful to only have a short, polite conversation, and then move on to talk with other colleagues. After that, we never even looked at each other. In all cases, we always carefully covered our tracks. Nobody ever suspected anything. My husband, Alan, was happy that I was doing a good job, but also annoyed that I was away so much, and that most of the parenting responsibilities fell on his shoulders on top of his own work as an IT consultant. Of course, I still loved my husband, although I noticed that we seemed to be growing apart. He always seemed to be busy with the girls and his work. I realized guiltily that we rarely had sex, and our love was diminishing. I made a mental note to myself to try and make it up to him. Alan, we experienced a difficult start to life when we were young, having our first child at 16, getting married at 18, and then having another child. Thanks to hard work as a team, we managed to graduate from university, me with a degree in information technology, Emmy with a degree in commerce, and raise 2 girls together. We did not complain about the difficulties because we loved each other very much. When Amy got her first professional job after graduation about 2 years ago, she was over the moon, and I was very proud of her. Finally, we both grew professionally, received a good salary, and were ready to start living a normal life together. At first, I supported her career advancement, but I grew increasingly resentful of the long hours and amount of travel the job required. She left the house around 7 in the morning and usually did not return until 6 or 7 in the evening. Most weeks she spent at least 1 or 2 nights on business trips, sometimes more, or didn't return home at all until Saturday evening. When she was home during the week, she either worked in the afternoon or just sat in front of the TV. On Saturdays, she slept late, then went shopping. On Sundays, I went to the gym in the morning and then had breakfast with my friends. She was usually too tired to go out with me in the evenings. We didn't get to spend much time as a family, and she was usually too busy with work to take time off, so the girls and I often took vacations without her. I noticed her personality was changing. The loving wife and mother gradually disappeared, replaced by a selfish, often irritated and cold inhabitant of the house and my bed. Our sex life was very average, and I was increasingly frustrated. Whenever I tried to bring up the topic, I was immediately shot down. She told me that it was all my imagination, or I'm tired at work, I work hard for us, our sex life is fine, etc. I was worried about what this might lead to. At the end of her first year, I was forced to accompany her to a staff Christmas party at the CEO's mansion. There I met her boss, Dan, for the first time, as well as his wife. We had a polite but short conversation about nothing, then he apologized and they went off to chat with others. My wife led me to the rest of the staff and began a conversation with them. Later, it suddenly seemed a little strange to me. Her boss seemed a very friendly person, if a little reserved, but not the ogre that Amy saw in him. Dan's wife was also very nice. Since Amy was his assistant, I thought we would have more than just a polite conversation. I also felt that Amy was a little tense. She has a habit. If she is nervous, she speaks very quickly, which gives her away. I thought it was strange that she was nervous about her boss when they were working so closely together. It was hard to understand. Although I trusted her completely, I still harbored this thought to think about it later. I was also very busy over the next year as I decided to start my own IT consulting company. Besides, I raised our girls with virtually no outside help, so I pushed aside most of my worries about Amy. As for life with Amy, everything was a repeat of last year. She traveled more and more often and became more and more distant from the 3 of us. Recently, I began to notice that her attitude towards me was becoming condescending and dismissive. She showed me little love or affection, and we had almost no sex life. Only occasionally, out of pity, did I receive a handout in the form of sex without love or intimacy. It was obvious that our relationship was falling apart. At the end of the year, I attended her regular Christmas party again. Our communication with her boss was a repeat of the previous meeting. Suddenly, I had a fleeting thought that she was hiding something. For the first time since we started living together at 15, I had doubts about her. Is there another man in her life? The thought was almost unbearable. We have worked together as hard as we can as a team, through so much adversity, to get to where we are today. She wouldn't do that, would she? What should I do? I didn't take extreme measures like hiring a private investigator or hacking her computer, but I began to watch her more closely. I couldn't find anything incriminating, so it was either my imagination or she was very good at hiding her tracks. In any case, there was nothing good between us. I guess I was too busy to care. Meanwhile, my girls were growing up quickly. 15-year-old Lauren was growing into a beautiful young woman, and 12-year-old Emma was on the cusp of womanhood. We spent a lot of time together and were very close, although, unfortunately, their mother had little time for them. Both girls were keen soccer players, so every Saturday morning during the season, I went to watch them play. This was the highlight of my week. After the game, we'd go out to dinner somewhere, usually their favorite Japanese restaurant, and talk about what they do. I noticed that they almost never mentioned their mother. Then, depending on the weather, we walked along the beach, watched a movie, or met with friends. After the first match of the season ended, Emma approached me, accompanied by the newest member of her soccer team. She was a charming young girl, tall, very beautiful, with a wide smile, long dark hair, and deep dark brown eyes. She was also very athletic and stood out in her first game for Emma's team, scoring 2 goals. "Hey, Dad, it's Callie. Can I go to her house and hang out this afternoon?" "Hi, Callie, nice to meet you." "Of course, Emma, if Callie's parents agree." Callie turned and shouted, "Mom, can Emma come to us this afternoon?" The woman, obviously Callie's mom, turned and walked towards us. She was the grown-up version of her daughter and absolutely breathtaking. She introduced herself as Sophie and readily agreed for Emma to come see them during the day. Then we chatted a little, but I still don't know what I said then. I remember that I was babbling something incoherently. After they left, my girls laughed at my embarrassment and then grinned at each other. That evening, Emma reported that Sophie was really good. She has been a single mother since Callie's father died in a car accident about 3 years ago. Sophie raised Callie and her younger brother Tom, aged 11, by herself. The single mother seemed like a real sweet spot to me. The following Saturday, as Lauren and I stood watching Emma play soccer, Sophie and her son came up to us and asked if they could stand next to us. I mentally prepared myself in case I saw her again and was determined not to look like such a fool again. We chatted during the game. She had recently moved to the city with a new job and didn't know many people yet. She was very happy that Callie had found a new friend in Emma and complimented me on her good manners. After the match, Emma asked if Callie could come over. "Of course, Emma, that would be great if you don't mind, Sophie." "Me not." "Callie, why don't you come right now and have lunch with us?" "Do you like sushi?" "Yes, I love." "Great. It's decided. And by the way, why don't all 3 of you have lunch with us?" I blurted out. "Thank you very much for the invitation, Alan, but then I would be invading your family, so I won't go." I was feeling a little dejected when Lauren chimed in. "No, Sophie, please, let's go. It will be very nice if you're with us, and for a change, I will have someone to talk to. You won't be in the way at all, please." She looked at me. "If you're sure I'm not interfering, Alan, that would be great." I shook my head and muttered something incoherent again. As we turned to walk to the cars, Lauren grinned and looked at me. The dinner was a great success. We, meaning mainly 4 girls, ended up chatting for almost 2 hours. I think Tom enjoyed talking to the other man and we chatted a bit about computers and football. At one point, I heard Sophie very casually ask my girls if their mom ever came to watch their soccer games. Lauren's answer surprised me. "No, never. She's not particularly interested in us. She is only interested in her work and herself. Dad is also our mother. He is the one who takes care of us." Sophie gave me a questioning look. The rest of the football season, we were used to having lunch together after each game. Emma and Callie became close friends and took turns visiting us after games and sometimes after school. Sometimes Tom would come over with his sister, but he seemed to enjoy hanging out with me more than with the girls. We often tinkered with computers, kicked a ball, or rode bicycles. I also noticed that Lauren often goes to visit Sophie, And sometimes they go shopping together and then sit over a cup of coffee and chat. I noticed that my girls never mentioned their mother to Sophie, and neither did I. Sophie and I also became fast friends. Since I was practically a single parent, like her, it became much easier for us to help each other raise our children. After the end of football season, our children were increasingly left alone on Saturday afternoons. When they went on their own excursions or visited various friends, usually without my wife, I was free. So, Sophie and I increasingly spent this time in each other's company and walked, had dinner, or watched a movie. I looked forward to our meetings more and more and realized that I was falling in love with her. Despite this, we never crossed the line that separated us from friendship. One day, while having coffee with Sophie, I told her that I appreciated the time she spent with Lauren. You know, she never stops talking about you when she returns home. Sophie this, Sophie that, I laughed. Well, Tom doesn't stop talking about you either after he's been with you. Alan is this, Alan is that, she laughed in response. Seriously, he needs a man in his life, so I appreciate you spending time with him. Then she suddenly said, "Forgive me for being rude, Alan, but it seems pretty obvious that all is not well between you and your wife." We never discussed Amy, carefully avoiding the topic. I sat silently for about half a minute. This was an issue that I pushed into the background for a long time, avoiding confrontation. The truth is, Sophie, if it weren't for the girls, I probably would have left centuries ago. A few years ago, things were pretty good, but not anymore. I tried to talk to her many times, but I just hit a wall. Our marriage was difficult from the very beginning. I think Lauren told you about Amy and I getting married? Yes, and she slightly blames herself for the situation you are in. I know it's crazy, and I tell her it's not her fault at all. This opened my floodgates. I spent the next hour taking out all my troubles on Sophie. At the end, she came over and hugged me tightly. It was my first real hug with a woman in ages. "I'm always here, Alan, if you need me. Know that." I just hugged her tighter and didn't let go. Another year soon ended, and it was time for Amy's annual Christmas party again. My next meeting with her boss was very similar to the previous two. This time I was on high alert. Although Amy and her boss seemed much more casual than before, something was wrong. I was definitely suspicious of the two of them. Later, towards the end of the evening, Amy excused herself and went to the toilet. After a minute, I looked back and noticed her boss was also casually walking upstairs, so I followed him in search. She was not in the toilet, and I began to search the huge house and was about to go through the bedroom door, opening it slightly, when suddenly I heard my wife's voice inside. "Merry Christmas, my dear." A male voice answered her. "Merry Christmas, my love." I peered through the door to find Amy and her boss holding each other in a long, passionate kiss. I quickly retreated in shock. I went downstairs, wondering what to do. I was beside myself, angry to death. I don't have a temper, so instead of immediately confronting me, I calmed down and decided to investigate and plan everything first. Amy returned shortly thereafter, slightly flushed, and spent the rest of the evening pretending to be my loving wife. I pretended that nothing had happened. Before the new year, while working while Amy was sleeping, I hacked into her phone and laptop. Amy should have known better. Keeping evidence on a personal computer, even if it's really well hidden, isn't very smart when her husband's profession involves knowing how to hack into it. My worst fears came true. There was a wealth of evidence across her work, personal, and secret email accounts that Amy had been in a long-term, passionate, and intimate relationship with her boss that began more than 2 years ago. I also found photos and videos of both of them having fun together, showing the depth of her betrayal. I saw from emails that Amy and Dan even discussed leaving their halves to be together. She seemed interested, but her lover was more cautious. I really turned out to be a stupid, ignorant husband. I placed hidden surveillance software on her phone and laptop. If I wished, I could remotely monitor her every electronic and physical move. My marriage was clearly over. The main priority now was to maintain custody of my daughters and protect my business and finances. On New Year's Day, I consulted with a divorce lawyer, specially for bestware.ru. She said that since the divorce will be without evidence of guilt, a lawsuit for adultery will not be brought. However, when it comes to child custody, once children reach 14 years of age, they will have the right to decide which parent they would like to live with after the end of their marriage. She also developed a strategy to protect my company from financial divorce proceedings. Emma would turn 14 in 6 months. Until then, I could tolerate living with Amy, and that gave me time to get everything organized. For this to work, I needed to keep this a secret from Amy. I told Sophie what I had learned, and she burst into tears. It was a surprise. I thought I was the one who was supposed to be upset and need a hug. I held her close to me for a while, and she tearfully told me that her husband had been killed while he was driving with his secretary. When she looked through his things after his death, she discovered that they had an affair. This made his loss even worse. After she came to her senses, we talked some more and I told her about my plans to leave Amy. She just smiled. To set my plans in motion, I first convinced my wife that since we were both now making good money, we should sell our small house and rent somewhere bigger while we looked for our dream home. We could use the cash from our equity to deposit into the new one. She readily agreed. Our house sold very quickly, and we rented another one nearby. I was listed as a tenant under a lease that was only for 6 months. I felt really bad sharing a bed with Amy when she was home. When we moved into a rented house, I caught a bad cold and used this as an excuse to move into a separate room so as not to infect it. And after everything, he just didn't come back, and she didn't say anything. Maybe she didn't notice, or maybe it was more convenient for herself. Then I asked my father, to whom I also told everything, to start a new IT company and become its owner. I was his only employee. Then I closed my own company and started running my business through my father's company. Everything was going according to plan until I ran into a very nervous and scary-looking Lauren. Lauren was dating her first boyfriend, and I immediately had a flash of déjà vu, assuming she was pregnant, just like her mom had been. Dad, it's hard for me to tell you this, but Mom is having an affair with her boss. I was shocked that she knew everything and was speechless for a moment. Indeed? Why do you think so? Well, right after we moved here, Emma and I went back to our old house to pick up something she forgot, and Mom and her boss were there. Well, it's a little strange, but it doesn't prove anything. They had sex, Dad, on the living room floor. After I recovered from the shock, I said, I've known about their affair, Lauren, for some time. Then why don't you do something about this cheater? Emma saw it too? Yes. I called to Emma, who was hiding within earshot around the corner, and she shyly walked into the room. I hugged them both tightly. I knew what a terrible thing they must have seen, especially for young Emma. Can you both keep a very big secret? They nodded. I'm going to divorce your mother soon. I'm just waiting until Emma is 14 so she can legally choose who she wants to live with. With you, they shouted in unison. It won't be easy to keep this secret, but we must do everything so that your mother doesn't find out before that. They smiled conspiratorially. After that, I asked Sophie to talk to Lauren between them girls. She now had her first boyfriend, and I didn't want her to follow in her mother's footsteps. Fortunately, Amy was not often present in the house, so we could tolerate her occasional appearance and keep our secret. We enjoyed it even more when she was gone, knowing that the end was just around the corner. We spent more and more time with Sophie and her 2 children, who often had lunch at each other's houses or went out together. One Friday afternoon, when my wife had been ostensibly at a conference all weekend, but was actually with her boss at a hotel at a festival, Lauren said, Dad, I'll be Sophie's babysitter tonight. Oh, really? What is she doing? She goes to lunch with a guy at Brasserie Paris. You know, this is a really cool French restaurant in the city. I immediately felt jealous and tried unsuccessfully to hide it. My daughter looked at me pitifully. She's coming with you, idiot. It's time for both of you to go on a real date. I already made the order, so just call her now and invite her properly. She handed me my phone number. What if she doesn't want to go on a date with me? After all, we're just friends. I don't want her to feel awkward. I'm at a loss as to how you were smart enough to graduate from university. Call her now. I called, and Sophie seemed delighted and accepted the offer immediately. Somehow I felt that this was not a surprise to her. It took me 3 tries that night before my girls were satisfied with how I was dressed for dinner. As I was about to leave, Callie and Tom came into the house. In response to my puzzled look, Lauren said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you that they are spending the night with us tonight, so don't worry about coming home late, or don't come back at all if you don't want to." She smiled and handed me the already packed overnight bag. All of our children were clearly involved in a real conspiracy. When I arrived, Sophie met me at the door. My God. She wore a tight little black cocktail dress with a plunging neckline and stud heels. The dress perfectly hugged every inch of that superb, trim, athletic body. Her size 3 breasts, without a bra, simply stuck out in 2 small, seductive points. Her long black hair was loose and thrown to one side. "Well, say something, Alan." "I can't. I'm speechless." "Do you like it?" she asked, spinning around herself. "Oh, much more than I like, Sophie. I had the best dinner and we had a wonderful time in each other's company." At the end of the evening, when we approached the front door of her house, I said, "I know our kids made me stay the night, but you don't have—" She put her finger to my lips and said, "Shh, I'm counting on you to stay." And she led me inside and to her bedroom. I didn't mean to argue. At first we were a little shy and unsure. It was the first time for both of us with someone else. While I thought she looked stunning before, seeing her naked was simply stunning. It didn't take us long to get the hang of it and really get into it. I threw away all my unfulfilled mental and sexual frustrations and truly felt like I had died and gone to heaven. By the end, I was completely exhausted. The next morning, we made sweet love again, and then lay in bed for quite a long time, enjoying the aftertaste and the feeling of our naked bodies intertwined. It was a long time coming for both of us, and it felt so good and so right. We heard footsteps on the stairs, voices outside, and a knock on the bedroom door, which then opened and Lauren poked her head inside. "Good morning, you two. It's almost 10 and we're tired of waiting, so we came. Breakfast will be ready downstairs in 20 minutes. Oh, and I would ask if you had a pleasant evening, but judging by your expressions, an answer is absolutely not required." She grinned. There was laughter outside the door before they all left. "How wonderful our children are, Sophie. The breakfast they made was delicious, and it was wonderful to sit and eat it with the whole family." Later, at home, I tried to explain to my girls what happened to me and Sophie. After all, I technically cheated on their mother. They both rolled their eyes and laughed at my discomfort. "Dad, it's time for you to be happy again. Anyway, you're no longer married to your mom. She left you years ago. So, are you also accomplices in the conspiracy?" "Actually, we all agree. Emma and I need a mother, and Cassie and Tom need a father. You and Sophie are meant for each other, so everyone wins. Even if I thought it was a good idea, Sophie probably didn't." "Dad, really? Even you should have been able to understand how she feels about you and what she wants. Do I need to say anything about this?" "No, absolutely nothing, Dad. Their appearance showed that they found it all very funny. Now I felt that they were really controlling me. A few days later, over our dinner together, I announced that I was going to go house hunting the following weekend. Sophie asked, what kind of house am I looking for? Well, I want it to be close to the beach, 2 stories, have a big family room, a kid's escape room, a big backyard, and a pool. It must have at least 6 bedrooms in case my family ever grows, which you never know. Looking straight at her, I added, I also want to be sure that the woman I seem to have a crush on likes him too. Sophie stared back for a full minute, then walked over to where I was sitting and kissed me passionately in front of the children. When we paused to catch our breath, they watched us silently and then burst into joy as they danced around us. I took that as a yes. After weeks of searching, we found the perfect house and decided to buy it together, using Sophie's husband's money and mine from the sale of my house as collateral. Everything was prepared for the meeting face-to-face with Amy. As Emma's 14th birthday, and therefore X Day, approached, Amy announced that she was leaving for a sales conference on the West Coast for 7 days. Later, I checked her email and discovered that she was actually going on vacation with her boss, celebrating their 3rd anniversary in Bali, Indonesia. To avoid suspicion at work, they independently told everyone that they were spending the holidays with their families, having previously worked so hard that they had been neglected. She will leave work a day before her boss and fly to Bali alone. He will follow her in a day. She will return to work a day earlier than her boss to make this scenario seem credible. They became lazy. Their ploy was not up to their usual standards, as they could easily get punctured if anyone were to check. Amy flew out to her conference, and we immediately began packing up our things and moving them to our new home, where Sophie and her children had moved in a month earlier. Well, the Balinese god of vengeance, if there is such a thing, actually smiled at me. The same evening, Amy arrived in Bali. The local active volcano Mount Agung erupted in full force, spewing clouds of volcanic ash into the air. All flights to and from Bali were immediately suspended. Her lover was still at home, and Amy was stuck in Bali alone to celebrate their anniversary. I couldn't think of anything better, and I laughed so hard that I almost peed myself. The volcano continued to erupt, and flights did not resume, separating the lovers. Behind the scenes, I checked her emails and messages every day for fun. The lovers were unlucky, and Amy became very angry with Dan, as if it was his fault. Sometimes Amy would call home and tell us how busy she was at the conference, blah, blah, blah. Acting differently than usual, I asked her what the hotel was like and asked her questions about the city she was supposedly in. When I later logged into her laptop remotely, the story showed that she was frantically searching the internet for plausible answers whenever I thought of asking her anything over the phone. Meanwhile, the 6 of us settled well into our new home. I asked my lawyer to file a legal separation request with the family court. I also received temporary custody of my girls from the court after submitting their signed requests to live with me. As Amy's return day approached, all flights were still canceled, so I was wondering how she would handle the situation. She called me one evening to tell me that she had made a lot of contacts at a conference with potential big sales, and her boss asked her to follow up with them immediately before returning home. I could tell she was very nervous. It's also good that she didn't do video calls because I wouldn't have been able to keep a straight face. I just reassured Amy that we were fine and that I understood everything. When another week passed, she was still stuck in Bali. I saw desperate emails and correspondence between lovers. Her boss told everyone at work that she needed to extend her leave for family reasons. He also called me and apologized for keeping Amy away from home for so long, but it was a big opportunity, vital to the company, blah, blah, blah. I was expecting his call and prepared to respond in the spirit of an obedient husband to an important working wife. I assured him that everything was fine, and I understood everything. I then innocently asked where Amy would be going. He hastily came up with a few places, and I read his letter to Amy, where he told her where she supposedly should be. Of course, my strategy was to make her worry and plant seeds of doubt in her mind that she had been found out. Whenever my wife called, I continued to reassure her that I understood, but continued to ask about attractions in the cities where she was staying. I knew in advance what information she was looking for, so I always asked her a few unexpected, tricky questions, and enjoyed her attempts to answer. I was just playing the role of a brainless sheep. During one call, I said, "Hey, Amy, have you read about those poor souls who are stuck in Bali and can't get home because of the volcano?" There was a moment of awkward silence. "Oh yes, but I didn't pay much attention to it on the news. One of my colleagues was stuck there for 2 weeks. Do you remember Paul Howard and his wife? We met with them about 6 months ago." "Oh yes. We are working on a project together, and he has to do his part online via the internet from his hotel in Nusa Dua. Well, at least the Grand Hyatt isn't a bad place to get stuck." I heard Amy scream on the line. It was, of course, the same hotel where she was staying. Paul wasn't even in Bali, but she didn't know that. And immediately after the call, she moved to a cheap hotel on the other side of the island. She must have been praying to get away with it. Of course, my 5 girls and son thought the whole farce was funny. Yes, Sophie's children were mine now. Finally, after almost 3 weeks, the volcano stopped erupting and flights to Bali resumed. Amy called me to tell me the job was finished and she would be back Friday afternoon. I was waiting for her arrival from the airport in our rented and, in any case, now empty house. I planned this meeting very carefully. When she came in, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. She looked tired and very nervous. Unfortunately, she had a deep tan, which is unusual for someone who has been in business for 3 weeks. I was no longer bothered by her usual casual kiss on the cheek. "Wow, you got a nice tan on your business trip. Did you actually do any work?" She muttered something, blushing. "Sit down and have a glass of wine with me." I poured wine into my glass and took a sip. "Alan, I'm tired. I just want to go upstairs, shower, and relax before dinner. Sorry, but we have something to discuss, and it can't wait, so sit down right now, please. The girls will stay the night with a friend so as not to disturb us." Amy's face showed real fear. She thought that her game was finally over, and I was going to take strict measures. But she didn't know what yet. She reluctantly sat down, and I poured her a glass. I rehearsed this speech many times and made an apologetic face. "You know, things haven't been good between us for some time now, Amy. Don't you know why this is so?" She looked scared and just croaked, "No. I'm sorry to tell you this, Amy, but I can't sugarcoat it. The truth is that I met another woman. I love her and want to be with her. That's why I decided to leave you and connect with her." In an instant, an unexpected shock hit her, and the frightened expression on her face was replaced by an expression of silent rage. I continued to look apologetic. "I didn't want this to happen. I just think you're so far away all the time, and I've gotten lonely. How dare you do this to me, Alan? After everything I've done for you." "Who is she? I assume you're sleeping with her, blah, blah, blah." I just sat there with a sad face while she attacked me for about 5 minutes. "I see that you are very angry, and that's understandable. There's no point in continuing to talk now. I'll be back tomorrow around noon to talk again. We have a lot to discuss." Having said this, I returned to my new home. Lines of angry text messages and voicemails followed me. I didn't bother to answer. Everyone at home was worried about how it had gone. My answer: even better than expected. We had pizza for dinner and watched a movie together. The girls turned off their phones to avoid contact with their mother, although I made it clear to them that they could not completely sever contact with her. Why didn't I attack her about her affair? Because it will hurt her much more. That night, Sophie and I made tender love. All my worries and stress just melted away. "Who is Amy?" The next day I came to my old house, armed with a folder of papers. I was greeted by a still very upset Amy, along with her best friend Claire, who was a lawyer and whom I had never liked. I've seen old emails where Claire encouraged Amy to continue the affair in those early days, when Amy felt guilty and considered ending the affair. I sat down at the table facing them both. Apparently, Claire had been appointed as my wife's official representative and had decided that attack was the best form of defense. She went on and on about what an asshole I was and what a wonderful wife and mother Amy was, how I took advantage of her while she worked so hard for the family, how I had to beg her to take me back. If I don't do this, then she will rob me of the divorce and take the girls, and I will never see them. What hypocrites. Obviously, after last night, they thought that if I knew about her affair with the boss, I would bring it up. I maintained a sort of sad, apologetic, mocking expression. "Amy, I know this must hurt you, but I think I'm a little surprised you're so angry. It's been a long time since I felt like you really loved me at all. For the past 3 years, you have been physically and emotionally outside of our marriage." "This is complete nonsense, Alan. Of course I was in it. I know I work a lot, which often takes me away, but I did it for us." "Well, tell me, Amy, when was the last time we made love?" Amy didn't answer. "I can say it was 3 years ago." "This is not true at all. We have sex." "Yes, occasionally we had sex, but I'm talking about making love. In fact, I can name the day when it all started. Remember 3 years ago when you were on a business trip and forgot to call Emma on her 11th birthday? She tried to call several times in the evening and could not reach you. She was so upset. I remember this well because Emma's birthday was also 2 weeks ago when you were gone, and you forgot to call her again. I thought it was a bad anniversary for us. She looked at me guiltily. Ever since you returned from that trip 3 years ago, for some reason there has never been anything in common between us. I always wondered why this is so. I could see from their facial expressions that I had hit the nail on the head. They looked very awkward and glanced sideways at each other. After all, Amy, we slept in separate bedrooms for about 6 months and it didn't seem to bother you. I can't remember the last time we went out or relaxed together. It's like taking a vacation from work. They both shuddered. When you're at home, you're actually not with me. And with your girls, too. I smiled inwardly as they shifted in their seats. Anyway, Amy, I'm sorry, but I'm moving on, and I hope we can make our divorce as simple as possible for the girls' sake. In reality, there is no possibility for reconciliation. Who is she? I know her. You met her daughter, Callie, Emma's best friend, a few times. Last year, we met her mum, Sophie, at a Saturday football match and became friends. I think our friendship just grew from there until we realized we were in love. We were in love, then had a relationship, and recently decided to move in together. Before they could say anything else, I placed a large, numbered folder on the table. I have collected some documents and information for you. Tab A is the legal separation agreement that I filed with the court 2 weeks ago. Tab B is the divorce petition that you will sign. The sooner you sign it, the sooner we can move on. Tab C is the proposed financial calculation. Tab D is the new lease for this house. The lease expires in 3 weeks, so if you want, you can renew it in your name. Tab D, all utility contracts. I submitted my notice to terminate after 3 weeks. If you want to stay, you'll have to renew them in your name. Tab E, bank statement. I took 60% of the funds from our joint accounts. Credit cards are in your name and you are now responsible. Finally, Tab F is a temporary court order for custody and child support. The girls decided to move in with me so I could get custody. Child benefit will be deducted directly from your salary at work. Meetings with the children were left open to be resolved later, to our mutual satisfaction. They were stunned. I was so well prepared. Claire got excited. Bastard, you've been planning this forever. You won't get away with this. We'll fuck you and nail your skin to the wall. We will take your IT company, your girls, and your money. Well, yes, I've actually been planning this since Christmas. I had an inspiring moment at your staff's Christmas party, Amy. I realized that it was truly over between us and it was time to act. I saw Amy desperately trying to remember what happened there. Therefore, selling a house to buy another was a sham, Claire said. I just smiled. What about fuck me, Claire? I don't have a company that you can take away. I closed it a few months ago. Now I'm working for someone else. I bought a new house with Sophie to live in after filing for legal separation, so it is not an asset to our marriage. Since I have legal custody of the girls, I can and did use 60% of the cash from the sale of the house to buy a new one. So I'm not sure you can really do this, Claire. By the way, if you check the state law, you will see that when children turn 14 years old, they can choose who they want to live with. They chose me. You really are a scumbag, Alan. I bet you're the one who turned the girls' minds against Amy. I wouldn't do that. I'm not that mean. In any case, even if I thought I should configure them, there was no need to do so. Amy did it herself, neglecting them for the past 3 years. You, Amy, will have to work hard to get them back. It is important for their well-being that they have a good relationship with their mother. She didn't neglect them, she's a good mother. It's not the way they see it, Claire. She was practically absent from their lives for many years. Amy, ask yourself who feeds them, who takes them to sports, who packs their school lunches, who helps them with homework, who buys their clothes, who always remembers their birthdays and buys them gifts, who goes out with them in the movies, who do they turn to with problems? who helped them in the first months, and who gives them love and affection. I could go on. Well, Amy was very quiet. I could tell she was having a hard time making sense of what had happened. The girls asked me to ask you if you would meet them for breakfast tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in the morning at a cafe by the beach. In fact, it was my idea for you to meet, since in fact they don't want to see you. So, what? Can I tell them everything is okay? She just nodded. I left them both and returned to my family. The next day, the girls reported that Amy scolded me all the time and demanded that they live with her. Eventually, the girls excused themselves to go to the restroom and just quietly left. What I can't understand is why she wanted to make peace. She didn't care about me for years. Maybe I was just a convenient teacher and housekeeper for her. Amy. Aftermath. When Alan told me he was leaving me for another woman, it was a complete shock. How could he? I thought he loved me. Despite several attempts to talk to him about reconciliation, he wanted nothing to do with me. And the only contact we had was when we picked up and dropped off my daughters during visits. My girls were openly hostile towards me, and my time with them was unpleasant. When I dropped them off outside the house after a visit, they happily ran to their new stepmother and hugged her, deliberately to anger me. In the end, I told them not to come until they wanted to. I always assumed that my life would continue as always, with my lover for pleasure and my husband caring for me at home. The shock and emotional devastation of Alan essentially abandoning me was enormous. As the months went by, the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was a huge surprise. But it shouldn't have been. Alan was right. I was the absentee wife in many ways. Over the past 3 years, I have focused most of my love, emotional intimacy, and sex on Dan. There was little left for him to do. I realized that the only real surprise was that he stayed with me for so long. I couldn't afford house rent and child support at the same time, so I had to move into a tiny old apartment. I spent my nights at home alone, watching TV and eating crap takeout. When Alan left me, Dan's attitude also changed. He suddenly became too busy with his family to spend much time with me, even though I was now a free woman and always available. He increasingly sent me on business trips alone, saying that now I could handle clients on my own. When we were together, the emotional connection seemed to disappear. We'd just get together and have sex, and it wasn't great sex anymore. About 6 months after the end of my marriage, Dan announced that he was leaving the company to take a job with another firm in another city. I tearfully told him to never contact me again. In the blink of an eye, I became a divorced woman. I couldn't help but think of the line from Joni Mitchell's song, "Why is it always like this? You don't appreciate what you have until you lose it." I stupidly thought that I could eat a fish and sit on. This did not interfere with my confidence that Alan was now with a magnificent woman who was so good that it was even impossible to hate her. He is simply happy with his new partner. I remember this is how he looked to me when we were young parents struggling to raise 2 children. No matter what difficulties we faced, we fought together to overcome them and were happy and in love with each other. How did I let this fall apart? Both my girls looked much happier too. It was Sophie they looked at as their mother rather than me. I was just an annoying relic from their past that they were forced to visit from time to time. It really hurts. I think I hit rock bottom when I started crying to girls about my situation. Lauren looked at me coldly. "Well, so it was you who threw Dad aside? I know I wasn't a perfect wife and I neglected you all a little, but he was the one who left me for another woman." "Mom, he left you because you had an affair with your boss for 3 years. The look of horror on my face said it all. I was so ashamed. Alan knew about it all along, but said nothing. My life was disgusting. I really screwed up and left a really good husband and lost my daughters." True to his word, Alan encouraged our girls to stay in touch with me. He was right that it took me a lot of work to get them back. Gradually, they began to come without coercion, and sometimes even spent the night. One evening, as I dropped the girls off at their new home, I asked Alan if we could talk for a while. He got out of the car with me. I turned and stood in front of him. "Lauren told me you knew about Dan and me." I'm so sorry, Alan. You have been a good husband, and you have done nothing to deserve this from me. I was just an ungrateful, selfish bitch, and I got what I deserved." He just nodded. "Why didn't you tell me that you knew everything, Alan? Maybe you could stop me early enough to get our marriage back?" "By the time I found out, it was too late for that." "When did you find out?" "I caught you with your boss while you were secretly meeting at the office Christmas party last year. I didn't let you see me, and then I dug around and found out everything you had. I blushed deeply. I was so ashamed. I have to admit, I was very surprised when you were stuck in Bali alone." "Oh, God, I feel so miserable. You must hate me. Why didn't you convict me?" "I was very angry with you and wanted you to feel my pain and take revenge on you. I did some research and discovered that you weren't the first secretary your boss slept with. He actually has quite a history of conquest and then moving aside. I decided that the best way to punish you was to simply remain silent and let events take their course. Knowing his past, I thought that if your affair remained a secret, he would probably keep you on the hook for a while and then eventually get tired of you and leave you for someone new. I was afraid that if I caused a big scandal, his wife might find out and divorce him. Then he will probably free himself and stay with you, and you will remain unpunished. And also, I thought that if you thought I was just leaving you for another woman, it would make you feel a lot worse. I must say that your strategy worked perfectly. You certainly took your revenge well, Alan. My life has turned to crap. I think that now, looking back, I'm sorry that you got hurt so much. Well, a little sorry, to be honest. You don't have to apologize. It was my fault. I would have left you if you had done what I did. Looking back, I was simply seduced by the joyful excitement of it all and became addicted. In the first days, I tried to stop, but it was too late. I was so carried away by him and immersed in my desires that I forgot about you and my girls for a while. My anger is gone, Amy, and I truly forgive you. I also now approach life more philosophically, it seems to me. After all, I wouldn't be with Sophie now if you hadn't cheated on me. Yes, I understand, and that's partly what hurts the most. Our marriage was difficult from the very beginning, Amy, so I don't think you're a bad person at all. Yes, you made a really big mistake, but he was a professional seducer. You never had the chance to grow up properly, to enjoy all the normal things teenagers do, especially dating and figuring out who you really want to spend the rest of your life with. You are ripe for the picking, and your boss plucked you like ripe fruit. You're probably right, Alan, but why did you tell the girls about him? It was too cruel. No wonder they hated me. I didn't tell them, Amy. They told me. What, how? They both unexpectedly returned to our old house and found you two copulating in the living room. Remember, right after we took our things out. At first I couldn't remember, then with horror, the picture was restored to my memory. What did they see? Everything, and quite well, even Emma. Lauren gave me a pretty graphic description of the event. My whole body seemed to just crumple, and I began to sob from the depths of my soul, not paying attention to anything around me. I don't know how long I cried, but I realized Alan had his arms around me, supporting me and holding me tightly in his arms, with my head buried in his chest. That familiar feeling and smell just made me burst into tears again. I felt like I was lifted, carried inside and laid on the sofa. I felt so terrible. Everyone, including Alan's new partner Sophie, was so sweet and caring. She insisted that I stay, first to calm down, then when I came to my senses, she insisted that I stay for dinner. Sitting at the table with his new family, Alan looked so happy. I really screwed up. Later that evening, as I was walking out to the car, he put both hands on my shoulders. Amy, I don't want you to keep punishing yourself so much and keep being miserable. We had a really rough start in life when we were too young to be parents and commit our whole lives to each other. When you think about it, the most amazing thing is that our marriage lasted so long, 14 years. This is our common merit. Look on the bright side. Our two mistakes produced two adorable daughters, whom we raised to become two beautiful young women. This is a fantastic legacy of our marriage that can never be taken away. You're right, Alan. Speaking of mistakes, I must say that I made one more. Sophie is pregnant. That's why we're getting married sooner than expected. You seem to be very prone to making mistakes. You are a good man and a good husband, Alan. Better than I deserved. I wish you all the best." I hugged him and kissed him on the cheek, then left. My place is really busy. My only hope was that I could find someone else as good as him. Phantom chance. Alan, why did I forgive her so easily? A few reasons. Because hatred can consume you and make you cynical. Because she still regularly received punishment just by seeing me with Sophie. I loved her once too, and our connection still existed despite everything. Although I wanted to punish Amy, my real revenge was directed at her boss Dan, who seduced and took her away from me in the first place. I hacked into his computer too, sending him an email that looked similar to the email from Amy. It included a hidden Trojan that gave me full access to everything. I discovered that he had quietly and cleverly embezzled money from his old employer and was now playing the same game with his new one. I collected a lot of evidence and sent it anonymously to both employers and the police. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he pleaded guilty at trial and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. His wife was with him throughout the trial and then visited him in prison with their children. I met with her and showed her incriminating evidence of his numerous affairs. She was furious and immediately decided to leave him. To get revenge, I went to visit Dan in prison. At first, he didn't recognize me. "Hi, Dan. We actually dated before. I'm Amy's ex-husband." "What the fuck do you want, asshole?" "To give you messages. First, from my ex-wife, Amy. She conveys her wishes to you and hopes that you enjoy your new home here, which I personally helped arrange for you." "How?" "You know, you should use the services of a professional to encrypt your computer. Once I hacked it, it only took me 15 minutes to uncover everything. I just couldn't resist sending this material to the police. After he stopped swearing at me, I said, 'I hope you don't mind that I also visited your wife and deigned to show her all the compromising photographs and videos that I found about you and your friends. I must say that she is very, very angry with you. She insisted that we take revenge on you in your bed, and I couldn't refuse her. I don't know why, but she missed you. Nonsense. She asked me to show you this, and I put in front of him photographs of both of us having sex in different positions. Of course, they were faked using Photoshop, but he didn't know that. She asked me to tell you that she will never visit you here again, and you will never see your children again. I gave her the name of my lawyer, who is organizing a divorce from your sorry ass." The look on his face was priceless. Yes, revenge is a dish best served cold. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.